What are the top housing and financial planning trends impacting your business? Find out this and more with TrendSpotter, brought to you by CMPS Institute.
Welcome to another edition of TrendSpotter. My name is Gibran Nicholas, and today I'd like to talk to you about why household growth is the best kept secret in housing. In fact, if you take a look at the chart on your screen, you'll notice that we are currently experiencing the largest growth in household formation in over 10 years. The last time over 1 million new households were formed was back in 2006. You see, when new households form, these new households need a place to live. So whether you own a home as your primary residence or whether you invest in single-family rental units, this is good news for you because increased housing demand equals a greater chance that house prices are going to go up. In fact, the other chart that you'll notice on your screen shows that the party is only getting started. In fact, the number of households in the baby boom generation is close to 45 million households. The number of households in the Gen X generation is over 40 million households. However, the number of households in the millennial generation is just north of 10 million, which means that over the next several years, as the millennial generation begins forming their own households, you're looking at least another 30 million households forming. Now, much has been said about how the millennial generation does not like to own things, they prefer to rent them. But even if that's true, and these individuals, these 30 million households that are going to form over the next several years, even if they decide to rent instead of buy, this is still fantastic news for the housing market because these individuals are going to need a place to live. And so if you invest in real estate as a real estate investor, these could potentially become tenants for you. So if you really want to take advantage of this trend, you may want to become very familiar with the CMPS Institute's rent versus buy calculator that's available to CMPS members. For instance, let's compare the cost of renting versus the cost of buying a home if your budget is somewhere in, let's say, the $1,800 a month range. And so if somebody's considering spending $1,800 a month in rent, you would then type in what the house purchase price would be for a comparable home. And so if in your market, let's say, for instance, the house that they could purchase for a home in that price range would maybe be about $250,000. If the down payment in that scenario is 3%, and your total points and closing costs are $6,000, your prepaid items are $5,000, your upfront mortgage insurance, let's say, is nothing if you use a conventional loan program. You're not going to add that to the loan amount. Your mortgage interest rate, let's say, might be around 4.5%. Your monthly mortgage insurance, let's use a factor of maybe 1.65%. Of course, that's going to change based on the mortgage insurance company that you use and so forth. Let's say that monthly property taxes for a home in that price range might be around $360 a month. Home insurance might be around $70 a month. Association dues, let's say, are nothing if they buy a single family home. And so you're looking at the total housing expense here being almost $2,000 a month versus $1,800. But that doesn't take into account the tax benefit of home ownership. So if you deduct the mortgage interest and property taxes on your tax returns, and you're in a 25% tax bracket, that means that your tax benefit in that instance would be $317 a month if you buy versus rent. If you scroll back down and ask yourself, is mortgage insurance tax deductible? This year it is not tax deductible in 2015, so you would say no. Your annual house price appreciation, let's say, is 3%. Let's say your holding period is 7 years. Your expenses to sell the house when you go to sell is going to be around 10%. If you were to invest your down payment money instead of buying a house, perhaps investing it in the market, you might be able to earn 5%. And so once you take about 3 or 4 minutes inputting these numbers, the calculator automatically spits out for you the results. And so the cash required to close in this example is $18,500 versus $3,600 for your first and last month deposit for renting. If you were to take that difference and invest it in the market at 5%, you'd have about $20,966 at the end of the 7-year holding period. On the other hand, if you decide to take that money and buy a house with it, you'll have about $65,000 of home equity at the end of that time period, which results in an additional $44,000 in wealth even after you take into account the expenses of selling the property, which most buy versus rent calculators don't consider that, but we do, of course, consider that in this analysis. So by presenting this to a potential buyer in a one-page, easy-to-understand format, could be a great way of telling the story of why it makes sense for these millennials as they begin forming their own households, why it makes sense for them to purchase a home versus renting a home. I hope you found our time together to be very beneficial. If you want any more information on the types of things that we've talked about here, check out the CMPS Institute website at cmpsinstitute.org/simplify. Thanks and have a great rest of the week.
Oh my gosh.
This is Mortgage News Network.